Hey all and welcome back. Continuing the new tradition, I'll be taking a look at the top 2025 offensive draft prospects worth watching during the upcoming weekend games for week 2. As always, we'll be taking a look at 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 2 tight ends. If you want to make sure you don't miss future Friday watch list videos like this, be sure to subscribe to be able to catch them before the weekend. Now let's get into some exciting names to watch this coming weekend. Starting out the list with quarterbacks, we have Quinn Ewers from Texas. Ewers started out the season with a good start, but was against relatively weak competition against Colorado State and was at home. This week is another story with a much tougher matchup going to Ann Arbor to take on Michigan. Though Michigan didn't look as stout last week as they did last year, they are still a quality defense and the atmosphere at the stadium will be like a playoff game. Last year Ewers was hit or miss in big-time matchups, so it'll be interesting to see how he looks this Saturday. On that note, consistency has always been an issue for Ewers, so it's important for him to have a good performance this weekend and to continue to stack good performances. The longer streak of good performances he has, the more comfortable NFL teams will be in his development. So between this being a big matchup on the road and seeing if Ewers can stack good performances early in the season, I'll be interested to see if we can get the Ewers who looks like a first-round quarterback or the Ewers who looks like he still hasn't progressed in his development when he takes on Michigan on Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern. For the second spot, there's a number of quarterbacks that I probably could have gone with here. However, with this being my list, I want to go with one of my favorite sleeper quarterbacks in this class, Rocco Becht from Iowa State. For those who haven't watched him, he's a smart player with mostly good mechanics that let him do well in Iowa State quick passing offense. With that being said, I do have some concerns about whether he has the arm strength to be a starter in the NFL, and if he can play out of structure, which caused him to only be my 18th best quarterback in my summer rankings this year. Last year, Becht caught my eye in the team's second game against Iowa, so it's only natural I want to see how he does this year, traveling to Iowa with another year of development. As I mentioned, I don't know if he's a starter in the NFL, but a good performance against Iowa and continuing that momentum throughout the season could start to get him some attention. So I'll be watching him this weekend to see how he does against a good Iowa defense in a rivalry game on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, and to see if this could be the start of a possible rise for him and to start to get some attention from the draft community. Going to running backs, with likely the most obvious inclusion for this list after his huge performance last week and his big-time matchup this week, we have Ashton Jeanty from Boise State. Those unfamiliar with Jeanty got a great introduction after he rushed for 267 yards on just 20 carries against Georgia Southern last weekend. Now, this was against lower competition, but the move Jeanty was making were ridiculous at times, and the defense just had no answer to stop him, and only got bailed out when Jeanty had to leave the game late with what looked to be a cramp. Also, one of Jeanty's best traits is his pass-catching ability, which we didn't get to see fully unleashed last weekend. So with a much tougher matchup this coming week, I'll be interested to see if Jeanty can replicate some of the magic from last weekend. Also, I'll be interested if the team will use him more in the passing game, and if he'll get a chance to showcase his full skill set, and why he was my top-rated back in my summer scouting for this last summer. With a tough matchup going to Oregon on Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern, it'll be a great opportunity for Jeanty to showcase his talent and show that they are translatable against higher levels of competition like he showed throughout all of last season. The game will be very late for a lot of people, but should be worth staying up for. The other back I'll be watching this weekend will be Raheim "Rocket" Sanders from South Carolina. I was pretty bullish on Sanders for my summer scouting after an up-and-down 2023 season that got derailed due to injuries. I still had him high in my summer rankings due to how he looked like a complete and dominant back in 2022. So I was a bit interested to see how he would do against Old Dominion last week, but was ready to take it with a grain of salt with being against lower competition. Unfortunately, his outing was just okay as he had to get 83 of his 88 rushing yards after contact due to South Carolina's offensive line continuing their struggles from the past few years into this year. Now, the offensive line struggling in general isn't great for a running back and an offense as a whole, but them struggling against a team like Old Dominion and being in the SEC is extremely concerning. This weekend, South Carolina doesn't have an extremely hard matchup, but does face an SEC opponent with a matchup against Kentucky on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. So I'll be very interested to see what Sanders and the South Carolina offense is capable of doing. If they continue to struggle, we could be in for another long season for Sanders and a difficult eval in determining what he can do in a more capable offense with a more capable offensive line. Moving on to receivers, a name a lot of people may not even know about, but I'll be watching Jalen with Utah State. As I mentioned, Royals didn't make many people's rankings for their early 2025 receiver rankings, but I think that had more to do with limited exposure to Utah State than his actual ability. Because when I watched him, I was just blown away with how solid he looked and became interested in his potential. That impression made me rank him as high as my receiver 6 for the 2025 class. With Utah State not having a lot of big-time matchups this season, I'll be very interested to see how Jalen Royals does against better competition against USC. Last weekend, USC's defense didn't look unbeatable against LSU and seemed to be willing to concede short passes, which could give Royals a good floor. However, I want to see if he can break through their defense and deliver on big plays and really showcase his talents. As I mentioned, Utah State won't have a lot of big-time matchups this season, so Royals will need to have some urgency and come up big in these instances. It'll be a very late game that honestly I'm not sure if I will even stay up for or if I'll have to catch it the next day, but be sure to catch Royals when he takes on USC on Saturday at 11 p.m. Eastern, either live if you're staying up that late or the next day if you can record it. Breaking the streak of players going on the road, I'll also be watching Tai Felton from Maryland. Now, if you aren't familiar with Felton, don't worry, because to be honest, I wasn't overly familiar with him either, and didn't even have him as part of my summer scouting series. However, when you put up nearly 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in the season opener, you're likely going to find yourself on this list. Now, those 200 yards and 2 touchdowns did come against UConn, who again, will sound like a broken record, but aren't the strongest competition. That being said, Maryland isn't exactly known for having a high-power offense, so it will be interesting to see what the team and Felton look like as they enter Big Ten play against Michigan State. While I was more familiar with Felton's teammate, Kane Prather, who also had a solid game against UConn, I'll be specifically watching Felton to see what I may have been missing during my summer watch and to see if he can replicate his success against better competition. Sorry, Maryland fans, as I probably won't say this often, but be sure to check out Maryland's offense and Felton when they take on Michigan State on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Finishing things out with tight ends, I'll definitely be watching receiver tight end convert Oronde Gadsden II at Syracuse. For my summer scouting, I point out that Gadsden has decent size and good receiving ability to handle receiver side of tight end, but I wasn't confident in his blocking ability or his ability to play inline due to the team playing him inline on only 8 snaps throughout his entire career. Last weekend though, Gadsden impressed me by playing 11 snaps inline in a single game, which is more snaps than he's played in his entire career while inline. Now the blocking was still a work in progress, but this revelation was definitely encouraging. It'll still be an uphill battle for Gadsden to make the full transition to tight end, but getting the start on this transition now in college and getting that experience inline will be huge for his development and draft outlook. It's unfortunately a deep tight end class for him, so he could still fall or may even go undrafted. However, he could be a nice find for a team later in the draft that's willing to be patient. So while their matchup against Georgia Tech on Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern isn't the most exciting matchup, I'll be interested to see if Gadsden continues to play a high amount of snaps inline and if the snap percentage starts to shift at all. Again, if he does get more and more experience inline as the season goes on and he comes in at a healthy way at the combine, he could become a sleeper for a lot of individuals. Finishing out this week's list, I'll be watching Gavin Bartholomew out of Pitt. I feel like there's something wrong with me because I'll watch Bartholomew and think, yeah, I'm just not sure if he has the starter qualities here for the NFL, but then time goes on and I find myself pulling myself back in and believing in him. I was low on him for my summer scouting, but I'm bouncing back to that believer side again with the way new offensive coordinator Cade Bell is using him. After primarily being used inline and being a minimal receiving threat the past 2 seasons, Bell's been using Bartholomew more as a receiver, putting him in the slot and out wide more, and using scheme passes to help make the most of him in the receiving game. This led Bartholomew to finish with 5 catches for 66 yards against Kent State last weekend. Now that doesn't sound amazing, but when using the context that he finished with just 18 catches last season, 21 in 2022, and 28 in 2021 as a freshman, it seems like he's on track to easily set some career highs as a pass catcher. So, in kind of an opposite trail of thoughts with Gadsden, I'll be very interested to see if Bartholomew continues to be a focal point of the team's offense and be used more out in the slot and out wide. I'll be interested to watch him this coming Saturday against Cincinnati at 12 p.m. Eastern to see if I may finally settle on being a believer in Bartholomew. And that does it for the players for week 2. There weren't a lot of great matches this week, but I'm sure there are still players I missed that are still worth watching. So let me know in the comments or on Twitter or X who you'll be watching this weekend. Again, this will be a weekly series for me going forward for the whole college football season, so be sure to subscribe to not miss any of the future week's videos. While you're at it, like the video as it would help the channel and the series grow thanks to you. As usual, you can check out Fantasy Trading Room as I'm a contributor for the NFL Dynasty and Fantasy pages there. Also, I do a weekly article series on Fantasy Trading Room called the College Football Stock Report that identifies 8 players who had strong performances and 8 who hurt their draft prospects after each weekend in college football. So if you aren't able to catch all the games, be sure to check that out to keep up with players that are trending up or down. But thank you all and see you all next time.